NBC News, the State of the Union Address. Live from Washington, here is Brian Williams.
And good evening from Capitol Hill. In just a few moments, we'll hear the familiar call of the Sergeant at Arms, Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States. And then to great cheering and sustained applause in one of the rituals of American politics, President George W. Bush will slowly make his way down the aisle of the House chamber, where he tonight will address the nation on the State of the Union. Beyond the backdrop in the chamber, there is the very real backdrop of a nation at war. There is a raging debate over the tactics used in that war. There are questions about energy in this, the first State of the Union since Hurricane Katrina exposed cracks in American society. And while the president can point to today's victory, the confirmation of now Justice Samuel Alito of the Supreme Court, who we're about to see enter the chamber. Along with that victory tonight, there are other issues like the economy and health care looming large tonight as we watch members of the Supreme Court, 4 of them expected to attend tonight, 4 of the 9. We'll be joined throughout here tonight, of course, by our NBC News correspondents and analysts, all of them led by the man at my side in the studios tonight, our Washington Bureau Chief, moderator of Meet the Press, Tim Russert. And Tim, a year ago, this president said he had to spend his political capital. As he steps behind the lectern tonight, what's left in that bank account?
Well, Republicans will acknowledge, Brian, not much. He spent a lot on Social Security reform. That went nowhere. He lost a lot in Katrina for the lack of response. In Iraq, the great uncertainty. So much political capital invested in that war, Brian, and we still don't know how it's going to turn out. The president is in his 6th year. 6 years have not been good to presidents. Nixon impeachment, Clinton impeachment, and Ronald Reagan, Iran-Contra. This president is determined to spend his final 3 years trying to lift the mood of the country. By his own admission, we live in anxious and unsettled times as we speak tonight.
As we watch members of his cabinet entering the chamber tonight, it's hard to believe that the Bush presidency is down to roughly, give or take, 1,000 days. And he'll try so mightily hard to avoid that lame duck label. What can he do to differentiate these remarks?
He's at 39% in the polls. He realizes he cannot give a laundry list, an agenda of legislative items. This is much more of a philosophical call to arms. Stay with me on Iraq. Whether you are for the war or against the war, we cannot cut and run now. This is the view that he's trying to put forward. Democrats are going to say, Mr. President, we've tried to reach out. We can do some things in your final 3 years, but it can't just be your way. We have to work together. The president seems to be saying tonight, all right, let's work together. Let's change this tone. That seems to be the secret to unlocking this poison atmosphere, Brian, that exists in Washington. Can either side step forward and be willing to compromise and to try to achieve some good in difficult areas like the environment, like education, like Social Security, like health care? It is a real challenge for both major political parties.
As we're talking about the achievements of the Bush presidency, there is a picture of at least 2 of them. 4 members, as we said, of the U.S. Supreme Court attending tonight. There, of course, are no rules saying that any of them should attend. Justice Breyer tries to. He's a former Senate staffer with a great love for the institution. But in that one picture there, you had the new Chief Justice, Bush appointee, Chief Justice John Roberts, and the brand newly minted Associate Justice of the Supreme Court, Samuel Alito. The vote of the Vice President was not needed. It was not a squeaker on the Hill today, as it turned out.
An issue so important to the Bush conservative base in the presidential election of 2000 and 2004.
As we look at proud product of the state of New Jersey, Judge Samuel Alito taking a long, good look. Military brass just behind him, General Peter Pace of the Marine Corps. And we are told President Bush, you see the closed...
that he was the kind of guy that would show up for an airplane 30 minutes early. And so he arrives at these events early. Every president has its own clock. George W. Bush's is different than Bill Clinton's. They have their strengths, they have their weaknesses.
It is written only that the president...
My view of our country, our State of the Union.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
And the applause we were talking about as the president, surrounded by the leadership, both parties, makes his way down the aisle. On your right, every year we talk about how Congressman Eliot Engel, Democrat of the Bronx, manages to get to the aisle, and he has done himself proud again this year. The woman whose son was killed in Iraq, who protested much of this summer outside the Bush Ranch near Waco, Texas, was to be the invited guest of Congresswoman Lynn Woolsey of California, a Democrat, and she apparently has been arrested and taken off the premises of Capitol Hill tonight. We'll learn more about that, I'm sure, as the hours go by. The president greeting his Chief Justice, his Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense. David Gregory, you have a few moments here before the president gets up to the rostrum, our chief White House correspondent. In your view, to add to Tim's words, how will this speech differ from the years past?
What I think is so important, Brian, is that the president has always made the case that the war in Iraq was tied to the attacks on 9/11. I think the president will try to go beyond that tonight and argue that America is at war with radical Islam and that we are past the midline in that conflict, and that even though debate goes forward about retreating, that we have gone too far to turn back now. And I think that's going to be a consistent theme tonight.
Copies of the speech to the Vice President, Speaker of the House Dennis Hastert. Let's take a little of this in.
Members of Congress, I have the high privilege and the distinct honor of presenting to you the President of the United States.
Mr. Speaker, Vice President Cheney, members of Congress, members of the Supreme Court and Diplomatic Corps, distinguished guests and fellow citizens. Today, our nation lost a beloved, graceful, courageous woman who called America to its founding ideals and carried on a noble dream. Tonight, we are comforted by the hope of a glad reunion with the husband who was taken so long ago, and we are grateful for the good life of Coretta Scott King.